Hollywood has always been seen as the land of glamour, secrets, and the place where dreams either rise or collapse, but one of its strangest secrets had nothing to do with scandals, affairs, or controversies. Instead, it was all about height. For decades, film studios worked tirelessly to control how their leading men appeared on screen. They wanted them to look taller, stronger, and larger than life. To make this illusion believable, studios went as far as building trenches on sets so taller actresses would look shorter, hiring women who were specifically under a certain height, and even paying for custom elevator shoes for their stars every few months. The obsession with appearances was so extreme that one studio reportedly spent over $100,000 just on digging holes so their leading actor could look taller on screen. In some cases, contracts were written to ensure co-stars never appeared taller than the male lead. To the audience, the illusion worked perfectly. No one questioned it. Generations of moviegoers believed these men were towering figures when in reality many were much shorter than they seemed. Take Mickey Rooney, for example. He stood only 5 feet 2 inches tall, making him the shortest leading man in classic Hollywood. Yet for 3 years straight in 1939, 1940, and 1941, he was bigger at the box office than legends like Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, and Cary Grant. MGM made more money from Rooney than any of them, and it was largely thanks to his role as Andy Hardy, a teenage boy he played in a long-running film series. What made it remarkable was that Mickey was already in his mid-20s when he was cast, but his boyish face, boundless energy, and small size helped him convincingly pass as a high schooler. Audiences adored him. 16 movies were made in the Andy Hardy series, and when adjusted to today's money, they earned about $1.9 billion. Rooney became a symbol of American optimism during the Great Depression. His youthful charm gave people comfort during dark times. But the very thing that made him famous soon worked against him. After World War II, Mickey returned as a decorated soldier with a Bronze Star, but Hollywood no longer knew where to place him. He wasn't a boy anymore, yet his short stature and youthful appearance made him look out of place in roles meant for grown men. Casting directors kept writing the same words on his forms: height problem. Romantic scenes seemed awkward. He even joked once that he needed to stand on a box just to kiss his co-stars. His massive $5,000 a week salary was slashed. Studios stopped calling. By the early 1950s, he was working in low-budget crime films for far less money. But Mickey Rooney was not done. He found new strength in playing flawed, broken characters. His performances as weary boxing trainers and tired fight coaches earned him Oscar nominations. Suddenly, his size was no longer seen as a limitation, it gave his roles realism and grit. Then, in 1979, Francis Ford Coppola cast him in The Black Stallion as a retired jockey. For the first time, his short height was an asset. Jockeys were supposed to be small, and Mickey fit the role perfectly. The film made $40 million, critics raved about his performance, and he received yet another Oscar nomination. Even decades after his youthful stardom, Mickey Rooney continued to surprise audiences. By the time he was 25, he had already appeared in 43 films, and long after his boyhood fame, he still found ways to reinvent himself. Another example of someone who turned his small size into power was Sammy Davis Jr. At only 5 feet 3 inches, Sammy was considered short by Hollywood standards, but his presence on stage made him seem larger than life. Born in 1925 to a family of entertainers, Sammy was performing with the Will Maston Trio by the time he was just 3 years old. His polished shoes sparkled under the stage lights, and his dancing was so precise that audiences could not believe what they were seeing. But success didn't come easily. In the 1940s, many nightclubs didn't want to hire him. He was young, black, and short, and later, after a terrible car accident, he also lost one of his eyes. To many, he did not fit the image of a traditional star. But Sammy refused to let rejection stop him. Instead, he turned every reason people doubted him into a reason they had to applaud louder. His talents were endless. He could play drums like Gene Krupa, sing with the style of Frank Sinatra, and dance so quickly that audiences struggled to keep up. When people brought up his height, Sammy used it as part of his act. He would joke, "I'm a one-eyed Negro Jew. And on top of that, I'm short." The crowd would burst into laughter, and then he would silence them with a powerful performance of songs like Birth of the Blues. Even when Broadway producers worried about his height in 1964 while casting him in Golden Boy, Sammy worked harder than ever. His co-star was a tall Swedish actress, and producers feared the contrast would look strange. Sammy didn't argue. He trained until his boxing scenes were lightning fast, demanded stage lighting that exaggerated his presence, and made sure his energy filled every corner of the theater. The show became a sellout success before opening night, earning him a Tony nomination. One critic called him the littlest heavyweight in town. Sammy's success grew beyond Broadway. In Las Vegas, hotels that once refused to let him stay on site now had to bow to his demands. By 1968, he was making $35,000 a night. His contracts required integrated audiences, and he stayed in the best suites. No one could deny him anymore. Over his career, Sammy Davis Jr. released more than 50 albums, scored a Billboard #1 hit with The Candyman, acted in 38 films, and was nominated for Emmy, Grammy, and Tony Awards. In 1987, he was honored by the Kennedy Center. Beyond entertainment, he was deeply involved in civil rights. In 1965 alone, he raised about $750,000 for Martin Luther King Jr.'s organization, a staggering sum at the time, even more than many stars earned from performing. Then there was James Cagney, another Hollywood legend whose real height was far different from the myth. Studios often claimed he was 5 feet 9 inches tall, but his Army records showed he was only 5 feet 5. Biographers confirmed it. That was 4 inches shorter than the average American man in his era, and in the 1920s and 1930s, that mattered. Audiences expected leading men to be tall, commanding, and larger than life. To make Cagney appear taller, filmmakers shot him from the knees up, placed him on crates, or paired him with shorter actresses. Newspapers repeated the studio's fabricated height, and the illusion continued. But Cagney wasn't held back. He used his compact frame as an advantage. His movements on screen were sharp, fierce, and explosive. In The Public Enemy, 1931, his iconic scene slamming a grapefruit into Mae Clarke's face showcased not just his aggression but also his unpredictable energy. He stormed across the screen like a firecracker, impossible to ignore. His size became part of his intensity. In real life, Cagney was just as bold. In 1936, frustrated with being underpaid compared to Edward G. Robinson, he demanded equal pay from Warner Brothers. To make sure studio head Jack Warner took him seriously, Cagney climbed onto a golf cart so he could meet Warner's 6-foot frame eye to eye. He won the fight and got the pay he wanted. Directors quickly realized that Cagney's height wasn't a weakness, it was an asset. In White Heat, director Russell Walsh designed an entire explosive finale around Cagney's physicality. As he ran through an oil refinery, climbing ladders and dashing across catwalks while explosions erupted behind him, the camera followed his every move. A taller actor might have looked awkward or hit the ceilings, but Cagney's smaller frame gave him agility and speed. The film had a $1.3 million budget and earned it back in just 6 weeks. Even when playing real-life figures, his height never stopped him. In Yankee Doodle Dandy, he portrayed George M. Cohan, who was 5 feet 6 inches, just an inch taller than Cagney himself. Instead of being limited, Cagney adapted. His tap dances became tighter, sharper, and faster, showcasing his unique style rather than hiding his stature. The sound of those rapid steps that struck like a machine gun became unforgettable. It was more than just a scene, it became the very identity of the movie. By 1999, the American Film Institute named him the 8th greatest male star of Hollywood's classic era. By then, nobody cared about his height. What once seemed like an obstacle had become nothing more than a footnote in the story of his greatness. Edward G. Robinson stood just 5 feet 5 inches, far from the image of a Hollywood leading man. When he first arrived in New York at age 10 from Bucharest, he didn't even know English. The only languages he spoke were Yiddish and Romanian. He wasn't tall, and he wasn't considered conventionally handsome. Casting directors saw a short boy with a round face who didn't fit their idea of a star. But Robinson refused to let that stop him. Instead, he turned his supposed weaknesses into strengths. He practiced endlessly in front of mirrors, working on every detail of his face, every curl of his lips, every drop of his eyebrows, and the way his voice could thunder through a room. When people laughed at the idea of such a small man playing a gangster, Robinson fought back with a voice and presence that filled the entire space. His moment came on January 9, 1931, with Little Caesar. Robinson played Rico Bandello, a ruthless mob boss, and something extraordinary happened. Audiences stopped caring about his height. On screen, he dominated every scene, making the taller actors around him seem smaller. Time magazine said his 5 feet 5 inches frame fills the screen with menace, and they were right. Still, Warner Brothers worried that people wouldn't accept such a short crime boss. They lied, claiming Robinson was 5 feet 9 inches, and used tricks like low camera angles and making taller actors sit or slouch. But the success of the film silenced all doubts. With a budget of just $280,000, it earned more than $1.5 million during the Great Depression. Robinson had rewritten the rules of Hollywood. By 1933, he was making $85,000 per film, close to $2 million in today's money, and he was given script approval, a privilege usually reserved for stars like Clark Gable. Off-screen, Robinson was just as bold. During World War II, he volunteered for dangerous USO tours to support American troops. When asked why, he joked, "A 5 feet 5 inches target gives the Nazis half the chance," but beneath the humor was courage. He donated more than $250,000 to anti-fascist causes, and he built an art collection valued at $3.5 million by 1956. Charlie Chaplin, another Hollywood giant, stood only 5 feet 5 inches as well. That made him shorter than the average American man of the 1920s, but Chaplin transformed his height into one of his greatest advantages. He designed his famous character, the Tramp, with oversized pants, a tight coat, a tiny bowler hat, and a thin cane. The look exaggerated his smallness, making him seem like a child lost in adult clothes. But once he moved, everything changed. His wild energy, running, spinning, stumbling, and dancing, pulled all eyes toward him. In films like The Kid, Chaplin ran beside towering policemen, but the camera never strayed from him. Directors often had to pull the camera back just to capture his full movements. His small size became part of the magic. In 1923, he earned an astonishing $125 million for A Woman of Paris, 5 times more than Douglas Fairbanks, who stood taller at 5 feet 9 inches. Chaplin's appeal was unmatched. Behind the scenes, his stature even reduced production costs. Studio records revealed that filming Chaplin required less film stock because of his smaller frame, cutting costs by 12%. Even audiences reacted differently to his height. A Columbia University study in 1925 found that during scenes where a bully lifted Chaplin by the collar, viewers' stress levels spiked by nearly 40%. They felt protective of him, rooting for him to win. Chaplin knew this and used it brilliantly, like in City Lights, when his small frame outsmarted a much larger boxer with quick footwork and clever dodges. Beyond acting, Chaplin was a visionary businessman. In 1919, he co-founded United Artists alongside Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith, ensuring equal control over their films. His statement, "Physical inches matter less than creative control," became the foundation of their company. By 1952, his fortune had grown to over $50 million, worth nearly $600 million today. Even after leaving the US during the political blacklists, his influence spanned the globe. Though small in height, Chaplin's legacy towered over generations. Buster Keaton, another silent-era legend, also stood just 5 feet 5 inches. Unlike other stars who relied on booming voices or towering presence, Keaton became famous for his quiet resilience and unmatched stunt work. Born in 1895, young Keaton was thrown, literally, into vaudeville by his father. His dad even sewed a suitcase handle into Buster's costume so he could toss him across the stage. This brutal training taught Keaton how to fall safely, twist in midair, and survive dangerous stunts. When he moved to film in 1917, all that painful training paid off. His short build gave him a lower center of gravity, making him more stable than taller actors. A physics professor once explained that Keaton could withstand impacts that would topple someone 6 feet tall, as his body was 10 to 12% harder to knock down. Keaton pushed this advantage to extremes, performing stunts that remain legendary. In Sherlock Jr., 1924, a flood of 2,000 liters of water slammed him to the ground, fracturing his neck, a break he didn't discover until 11 years later. In Steamboat Bill Jr., 1928, a massive building facade fell toward him, missing his head by just 3 inches. He survived only because he had measured his position to the exact inch the night before. By 1927, Keaton was making $3,500 a week, about $60,000 today, and had his own studio. People mocked his size, but Keaton embraced it, staying expressionless through everything. His stoic face, even amid chaos, became his signature. When sound films arrived, his career faltered, but television revived him in the 1950s. His appearances on The Twilight Zone and in commercials introduced his unique charm to a new generation, proving that even decades later, his small frame carried enormous impact. Peter Lorre, too, defied expectations at just 5 feet 5 inches. His chilling performance in M, 1931, as a child murderer terrified audiences so deeply that some mistook him for a real criminal in the streets of Berlin. The film's success sold hundreds of thousands of extra tickets. After fleeing Germany in 1933, Alfred Hitchcock cast him in The Man Who Knew Too Much. Lorre's unsettling energy, not his size, was what the camera captured. In Hollywood, studios played with contrasts, pairing him with towering actors like Sidney Greenstreet. Posters exaggerated the difference, and audiences loved it. Ticket sales soared whenever the two appeared together. Lorre leaned into his unique presence, securing more than 300 roles between the ages of 27 and 40. By 1946, Warner Brothers gave him top billing, a rare honor for someone of his height. His eerie, unforgettable performances made him a legend. When he died in 1964, the New York Times described him as a short, pudgy man who could still take over every scene with his own special kind of evil. Burgess Meredith, standing 5'5" 1/2, built his career on voice and spirit rather than height. On stage in 1935, a director worried he was too small to compete with taller actors, so he told Meredith to project as if shouting across Times Square. Meredith did, and his booming voice earned him 29 curtain calls on opening night. Hollywood quickly signed him, paying him $25,000 for his first contract, over $500,000 today. Meredith carved out a niche as the underdog. His role in Of Mice and Men in 1939 showcased a raw vulnerability that critics said made him the tallest man on screen. He entertained troops during World War II, standing on ammo crates so thousands could see him. Later, politics blacklisted him, but he adapted by thriving on radio, recording thousands of programs where no one cared about his height. Television gave him new fame. As the Penguin in the 1960s Batman series, he became larger than life with his trademark laugh and unique style, receiving floods of fan mail. At 68, he took on one of his most famous roles as Mickey, Rocky Balboa's fiery trainer. His line, "You're gonna eat lightning and crap thunder," became movie history. Rocky cost just $1 million to make but earned $225 million, and Meredith's Oscar-nominated performance proved once again that size didn't matter. Lou Costello, another 5 feet 5 inches actor, found fame as one half of Abbott and Costello. Paired with his tall partner Bud Abbott, their contrasting sizes created comedic magic. Costello leaned into his childlike appearance, tight suits, high-pitched voice, and frantic energy, shouting "Hey, Abbott" while spinning in circles. By 1941, their film Buck Privates made over $10 million on a budget of just $180,000. What audiences didn't know was that Costello had once been a talented athlete. He boxed under the name Lou King, with 11 wins and no losses in amateur matches. He was also a basketball free throw champion and worked as a stuntman. His small size made his comedic falls even funnier and more dramatic, but it also gave him sharp reflexes and surprising strength. Costello even used his size in negotiations. When Abbott demanded a larger share of earnings, Costello argued, audiences pay to see the little guy squirm. By 1941, he was taking 60% of profits. Their war bond tour in 1942 raised $85 million, enough to fund an entire aircraft carrier group. But success didn't protect him from tragedy. On November 4, 1943, just before a live NBC broadcast, Costello learned that his baby son had drowned. He went on stage anyway and delivered the entire Who's on first routine flawlessly. When the show ended, he collapsed in tears. That moment showed the world he wasn't just a funny little man, he was strong. Alan Ladd, often billed as 5 feet 6 inches but actually closer to 5 feet 5 inches, became a Hollywood star thanks to a mixture of talent and studio tricks. Records show that between 1943 and 1956, Paramount bought him custom elevator shoes every 6 months. His breakthrough role in This Gun for Hire paired him with Veronica Lake, who was just 4 feet 11 inches, making them appear perfectly matched. Studios went to extremes to hide his height. Contracts required female co-stars to be 5 feet 4 inches or shorter unless trenches or platforms were built. On the set of Shane, trenches more than 1,200 feet long were dug to make taller actors look shorter beside him. In Boy on a Dolphin, Sophia Loren walked in water while Ladd performed on a raised boardwalk. Even with all the tricks, fans adored him more, seeing him as the small man who carried immense power. By 1953, he was one of the top 10 box office stars, earning more per film than 6 feet 4 inches Gary Cooper. The ending of Shane captured his essence perfectly. Against towering mountains, he appeared small, almost swallowed by nature. Yet when he delivered the haunting final line, "There's no living with a killing," his presence was enormous. That was Alan Ladd's gift, showing that size didn't define strength, and that true power could come from someone who fought for every inch.